Well, welcome everybody. I'm Ann Dolan, and I am the president and founder of Educational Connections. And for the last 27 years, I've been guiding families through the process of academics, through tutoring, test prep, and college consulting. And certainly the college admissions journey can be pretty stressful when it comes to applications and helping your child to stand out. And that's why we're here for day one of College Week. If you're the parent of a high schooler, you're even younger, you are in the right place. Because when it comes to college admissions, starting early really does matter. It gives your family time to make thoughtful decisions, avoid that last minute panic, and help your teen build an experience that's both meaningful and strategic. In today's session, Starting Early, Stress Less, College Admission Secrets from a former UVA evaluator, we're going to be talking about exactly what colleges are looking for. So I would love for you to meet my co-host, Kristin Landis. Kristin, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Ann.
I am so glad you're here. So just a bit about Kristin. She's a college consultant here with me at Educational Connections. And prior to that, she worked in admissions at the University of Virginia for 11 years. And while at UVA, Kristin reviewed over 10,000 applicants from in-state, out-of-state, and also from international student applications. So Kristin, today we're talking about younger students, students that have a path to get started and really get everything together to put their best foot forward. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about why starting early matters.
Sure, absolutely. So last week marked the end of the most competitive admission cycle that we have seen to date. Not only with my 11 years at UVA, but I've also been with Educational Connections about 3.5 years and have helped hundreds of students. So it was a very competitive season. So now more than ever, you've got to have a plan. When I was at UVA and I was evaluating an applicant, I was always asking myself, what will this student bring to my college environment? What type of contribution can they make both in and out of the classroom? What type of community citizen are they going to be? And the answer to that is what I call, what is a student's narrative? And that's what I was always looking for when I was evaluating an applicant. And the narrative is, what is a student's unique voice? I have so many students that say, I don't have a unique voice, but you actually do. Your unique voice is, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? What makes you tick? And to do that soul searching and to figure those things out, you need time and you need a thoughtful plan. You need time to build a story. You need time to play to your strengths and your interests, and you have to plan ahead. So that's why it's real kudos to everyone who's here today to start thinking about that plan.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristin. You mentioned that this has been a very competitive season. And when you and I talked last week, you discussed some trends that you're seeing. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind touching on some of those now.
Oh, absolutely. So number one, increase applications. So when it's the competitive year is because there's more applications, that's a decrease in acceptance rates. And you and I have been talking for over 3 years in these webinars. And every time we meet, I say, well, it's been an increase in applications. And yet again, this past season, class of 2029, again, we saw a 6% increase in applications. When I started at UVA back in 2010, they had 24,000 applications. This past year, they had 64,000 applications. You look at a school like UCLA, they had 174,000 applications this year. So that's just making it just a more competitive landscape. And where we're seeing those increases, and this is somewhat new, is in public universities. Public universities applications increased over 12%, which was substantially more than private universities. We saw a school like University of Texas, Austin, that had a 24% increase in applications. As I talked about UVA, what they've had in the past. And Virginia Tech, wow, this year for Virginia Tech was crazy. They had 58,000 applications. That was a 10% increase from them in prior years. But what this is also saying is if you dive deep into those numbers of applications at public universities, the percentages of those applications that are in-state versus out-of-state students, because there's a very different admissions rate between in-state and out-of-state. So when you look at UVA, of those 64,000 applications, 46,000 of them were out of state. For Texas, 48% of those were out of state. And for Virginia Tech, 46,000 of those were out of state. So substantially more out of state. And they're seeing the biggest increase in the South and Southwest. Although I saw University of Wisconsin this year had a really, really competitive year. So that's one other trend that we've been seeing, which is somewhat new. A trend that has been going for a few years, and Anne, you and I have talked about this in multiple webinars over the years, is testing. So testing was super important before the pandemic. It kind of went out the window with the pandemic and has systematically been increasing in importance. There are a lot of university admissions directors who have been very vocal about the fact that they see a lot of grade inflation. And so one of the few indicators that they can see to show a student's academic fit for their university and for preparedness is to look at their testing. So, I mean, the Common App even reported that there was an 11% increase in students submitting testing this past year. And a school like Boston College, very competitive college, 74% of the students that applied to Boston College submitted testing. So all that being said, that if your student is a good test taker, this could be a real feather in their cap. I also say to all of my students, you know what? We give it a go. We prep, we do the best we can, we take it at least twice, and we see where the chips fall from that. I don't think we're ever going to lose a test optional landscape, but I think systematically it's become more and more important. In fact, University of Miami and Ohio State just went back to test required this year. IVs are already required. But so I always say to my students, any time spent test prepping is time well spent. So testing. And then of course, early admissions. We've been talking about this for years as well. I always talk about the power of early decision. Early decision is when you have one school that you apply to, and if you get into that school, you have to attend. It's a contract between the student, the parent, and the guidance counselor and the university. We're going to talk a little bit more about early decision on Wednesday, but you can see the difference between a single-digit acceptance rate and a double-digit acceptance rate in early decision. Schools like Duke, Northwestern, Emory, they take over half their class in early decision. And then with regards to early action, which is when you apply earlier to a school, but you're not committed to go, they're calling early action now these days like the new regular decision. So we're just seeing more and more students apply early to school. And then lastly, rise in AI. So why should the college admissions industry be any different than any other industry that's seeing an increase in AI? AI is being used by college admissions offices. And I know there's been a lot of buzz about, they're using ChatGPT to detect whether a student has written their essay or not. Well, that's true. But they're also using it because of this huge increase in applications. They're using it to help them with the admissions process. They're using it to help synthesize teacher recommendations, to track demonstrated interest, which I know Renee's going to talk about in a couple of days, but that's where you actually literally track if a student is interested in your school. Did they take a virtual tour? Are they signed up for your emails? Are they opening them? So AI is really also we're seeing a bigger increase in that in college admissions.
Wow, Kristin, all of this is so fabulous and just very enlightening. All right, so you mentioned at the very beginning, sitting on the other side of the table and reviewing those applications. What is it that colleges really want?
Sure, absolutely. So if you think of it like a pyramid, and we've got a pyramid here, the foundation or the bottom is academics and program rigor. So that's going to be how hard are the classes that you're taking compared to the students sitting next to you in English class or walking down the hall. And then quite literally, how are you doing in those classes? So, there are students who can take all APs or all IBs, and that's fabulous. Great for those students. That's not a lot of students. So normally when I first meet with a student, I'll say to them, hey, what classes do you like? What classes do you really enjoy going to? And what classes are you sitting there looking at the clock going, oh my gosh, get me out of here. And if they say, oh, I really like chemistry, I'll be like, huh, okay. What is it about chemistry that you like? Or if they say, oh, I really love my history class, say, what is it about history that you enjoy? And we really start picking apart what their interests are and why they like what they like. And the reason, and another thing for doing this super early, and it's really important, is because of your course selection. When I meet with younger students, sometimes even before you walk through that door of high school, knowing what type of courses you enjoy and what your course progression will look like is important. I can't tell you how many students come to me second semester in 11th grade and they're like, well, I want to major in engineering. I'm like, okay, we'll find a college for you. I'll support you in this, but let's look at the courses you've taken. And they haven't taken those calculus or those math classes or those AP physics classes that they should have been set up to take earlier on. And it's not because they couldn't have done it. It's because they didn't have the proper guidance earlier on to set themselves up in the course progression that they need to. So program rigor, super important. Academics. That's like gets you in the door. After we look at that, then we look at community engagement and depth of engagement. And I think nowadays, most people know that colleges don't want a student that's a jack of all trades. They want to see you dive deep in one or few things. It's all about passion. It's all about interest. So if I have students and we say, okay, so they think that they like engineering, like, okay, and they're on the robotics teams. That's fabulous. There are 20,000 high schools out there. Students who are interested in engineering, usually they are on the robotics team. Or if they're interested in business, they are on DECA. And that's all fabulous and wonderful. But let's go a little deeper in that. What's going to set you apart from that? So what is it about engineering that you like? Now, engineering there's computer, electrical, mechanical, all the different kinds. And if I talk to a student and they're like, well, I want to go into computer engineering, we start picking that apart a little bit. And then we try to identify things for them to do outside of school. I have one student who's helping a nonprofit refurbish computers. I have another student who's interested in fashion. So she went and she started working at a consignment shop and she's doing some sewing projects on the side. I think parents and students sometimes mitigate the importance of hobbies. I once had a student who was, we were working together on Zoom and behind him was this gorgeous origami art. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? And he's like, well, that's, I just do that in my free time. I'm like, well, you never told me this. This is fabulous. Let's talk about that. That makes you interesting. That sets you apart. I had a student one who was interested in architecture. So yeah, let's take those CAD classes. Let's make sure that we're using our electives to highlight those things that we're interested in. But then she was almost apologetic and she's like, well, I really like to play Sims. I'm like, oh, fabulous. Sims is a computer game where you build houses. I'm like, well, let's talk about that. And we ended up developing that and elevating that in her application. So another just really interesting example is when I ask students, what are you going to do this summer? And they'll be like, apologetic, I'm going to work at Harris Teeter. I'm like, well, that's great. Having a job is super important because that shows that all different characteristics. And if you're interested in business, now you're actually seeing it at a granular level. So it's really thinking creatively and diving deep in the things that you're interested in. So that's community engagement. And then after that comes authentic character, or things that, what are the characteristics about you? I know we're going to talk later this week about a holistic review, but when I was at UVA, some of the things I was looking for in students when I was evaluating their application was an intellectual curiosity, a love of learning, the ability to work and collaborate with other people. A non-negotiable for me was giving back to your community in some way, form or fashion. So community service, showing leadership. And that leadership doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to be president of the class. You could have really led a significant project in your history class. That shows leadership. So looking for those characteristics throughout the application is what college admissions officers are doing. Now that's only half the equation. The other half of the equation that's super important that parents and students should know is, okay, you've done all these wonderful things. That's fantastic. How are you presenting that in your application? Super important. How are you talking about it in your essays? How are you structuring your extracurriculars? You need to provide this person who has no idea who you are a glimpse of what's important to you, that narrative. And you need time to plan that out.
That makes sense, Kristin. It's almost like, how are you packaging yourself?
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there's also a difference between kids that come to the table actually being pretty qualified for a particular school, but they may not or may be competitive. What's the difference between qualified and competitive?
Sure. And so lots of students are qualified, which means that you have, the minimum GPA requirements that they're looking for. You've taken, some schools require that you've taken Algebra 2. Some schools require that you have 2 or 3 years of a foreign language, that you've taken 4 years of English, those types of things, that you have the required coursework and that you've met kind of their minimum GPA, like you've performed at the kind of the average level. Then they look at your extracurriculars. Are you engaged in some form? And then are you showing that you can succeed academically in terms of have you taken the harder classes, if you're submitting testing? That's all great. And you have to be a qualified candidate. But nowadays in this competitive landscape environment, you need to be competitive. You need to exceed those things. And, and people don't need to sit on a webinar to know that they have to have a higher GPA and they have to have the classes for sure. It's really looking at it from the standpoint of that narrative, showing the admissions officer what it is about you that you're going to bring to their college environment. And are you the right fit for their college environment? Having that compelling personal narrative, that's super important. And again, you got to have a plan for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kristin, starting early, making sure that you can differentiate yourself. So when we think about the first steps in getting started in the early grades, what comes to mind for you?
Sure, absolutely. So this is really the balance between your academics and what you're doing outside of school, your outside engagement. And in 9th grade, it's all about exploration, experimentation, looking to see what you're interested in. If you think I'm interested in business, okay, business is a huge umbrella. That's finance, marketing, entrepreneurship, all different kinds of things. So using those electives really in a judicious manner, take that intro to business class, take that intro to marketing class. You say, oh, I'm interested, I think I may be interested in engineering. So, okay, are you starting to take those STEM design classes, those intro to engineering classes, all those foundational electives that are offered in 9th grade? Then the first thing I do with my younger students is we look at what the outside opportunities at the school are available to them. Do they have a, if you're interested in theater, do they have a drama club that you can join? Or if you're interested in a variety of different types of community service, most high schools have different community service groups. Identifying 1 or 2 things that they could go and give it a shot. Don't just go to a meeting, like really give it a shot and continue that exploration throughout the school year. And then when we get to 10th grade, now it's still about exploration, but yet you should start having an idea of, oh, I liked that, I didn't like that, I'm going to tailor my focus a little bit more in this way. We spend a lot of time in January and February and March looking at the course selections for the following year to make sure, first of all, that the academic rigor is appropriate, but second of all, making sure that we're elevating that narrative as best we can, giving students the opportunity to take those CAD classes, to take the auto tech class, or maybe, oh, I love history, take that extra history class if you're allowed, if you can, if it fits in your schedule. So looking at course selection, and then start thinking about test prep. Test prep this is a wonderful time. There are 2 tests. I know we have a whole day allotted to that this week, but seeing which format you prefer. Those are things that start happening in the 9th and 10th grade. Once you've had Algebra 2, thinking about those things gives you a little bit longer runway. Those are things we do in 9th and 10th grade. And then we get to 11th grade. And 11th grade is really about clarity of purpose and direction. This is the time when you should start really diving deep for leadership positions, honor societies, whatever you're doing it to that next level if possible in 11th grade. Literally this time in 11th grade, I've already working on applications with my 11th graders. So there's not a lot of time in 11th grade, but that's a really important time. And the summer of 11th to 12th grade is super important as well. You just have that time to really elevate that clarity of what you think you're going to be applying for, what subject you're going to be applying for colleges, and elevating that in your narrative. And in 12th grade, I do all my students, we do our Common App over the summer before 12th grade. So they go into 12th grade having all those things done. plus their core list of colleges already done, and working on applications. But there's still things to do senior year. And one thing, if we have 11th graders here, it's very, very important. 12th grade is your most important year from a rigorous coursework standpoint. When I was in high school, you took like basket weaving and senior release. Nowadays, they want to see, and it just makes sense, the progression, the elevation in difficulty in your classes. So 12th grade is really the time to be putting your foot on the gas, not taking it off.
Kristin, can you talk a little bit about exploring options and finding the right fit?
Sure, absolutely. So we just talked a bunch about what that application is going to look like, what that narrative is going to look like, but that's only part of the work. The other part of the work, and the reason it's so important to start early, is what do you want in a college experience? And asking a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old, what do you think you want to do or where you want to be the next 4 years, that can be difficult. So that requires a lot of time of self-exploration and research. Having the opportunity to even go see schools, take virtual tours, go talk to department heads, those types of things. So when we talk about your college list, we talk about match and we talk about fit. And match is when the school you want what's called a balanced list, and that's where you have targets. People have heard all these buzzwords before, which is where your GPA and testing, if you submit, kind of falls right in line with the accepted students. Safeties, I call them most likelies, where your GPA testing, if you submit, is higher, and then reaches if a school has a low acceptance rate, so reach for everyone. That's all fine, and that's our job to make sure that your list is balanced. Students' job is to find schools where they could envision seeing themselves. So there are a number of things that we look at when we look at fit. One is going to be academic alignment. Do they have the major or majors that you're interested in exploring? Do they allow interdisciplinary cross-pollination where you can take classes in different departments? Do they allow that academic freedom? Are the classes big or small? That's, how big is the college? How small is the college? Do you want more of a larger school, larger class size environment, or do you want really small where you really get to know your professors, that type of environment? I have all my students, when we look at colleges, go and read the mission statement of the university, because universities have very different focuses. Some are more research focused, some are more service focused, some are more academic freedom focused. So that's one thing I have all my students do, because you want to make sure what you want in a college is aligned with what that college is offering. Another thing that's really important is to make sure that they have the support services that you may need. Every college is required to have a student services or disability services office, but the offerings that they offer there vary. We're going to talk about that later this week as well. Then you look at the social environment. How do you think you want to spend your weekends? I always ask my students that. What do you think you want to do on the weekends? Is it important for you to be able to go to sporting events? Do you want to be able to go to museums and cafes and shopping and those types of things? Do you want, I always say, what is your ski slope? And I've said this before in webinars, what is your ski slope is, in the past, I've had students who love to ski. And you're going to say, well, you're not going to pick a college based on skiing. And you're like, no, of course you're not going to. But if it's something that's important to you, something that you want to be able to continue in your 4 years at a place, something to consider. I have students who are nature is really important to them, and they run trails. So they need to be somewhere where they'll be able to do those things. I had one student one year, and she goes, I have to have a beautiful library. I have to. So we did lots of research on how pretty the libraries were. Again, this is their journey, their experience. If it's important to you, something to consider. Then there's also geographic location. How far do you want to be from home? Do you want to be in cold weather, hot weather? Do you want to go internationally? I have lots of students who want to apply internationally. Looking at that. Financial, obviously very important. Time to have real conversations, parent and student, to talk about what that looks like. If you want to go to grad school, thinking about what that overall financial commitment's going to be. And then I always say, look at the aspirational. What's your career goals? Like, what does the Career Center do? Where do kids get jobs leaving? What's the alumni network like? And then lastly, and I don't think we can discount this one, is emotional. Like when you sit in the student center or you sit on the quad and watch all the students go by, how do you feel? What kind of vibe do you get? That's also something. So, and I also want people to start thinking outside the box more. I've been talking about this for a long time, but this is more now than ever to start thinking outside the box. The same 20 schools are on everybody's tongue. There are over 2,000 universities out there, wonderful places with fantastic programs. So you need to do your research, you need to broaden your scope, and you need to start that early because that literally just takes time to start doing that.
Kristin, do you ever have kids come to you and they're like, this is my list? And they're all very similar, large,
Oh, yeah.
football schools where they just really want the rah-rah and they haven't thought about all of the other factors. What do you do in those cases?
Absolutely. So the first thing I do with my students is I ask them to take a virtual tour. Now, a virtual tour, obviously that's not going to give you the same flavor as actually going to the university, but it will give you a little bit of an idea of it. It'll give you some visuals. I also have students, I have lots of different online websites and even social media. YouTube is actually a very valuable tool where students go on and talk about their experiences at schools. And so I've plenty of times I have students who initially start out, yeah, I want a really big school. And then all of a sudden it's pivoting. No, I think I want a small school, or, oh, I want to go far from home. And then they're like, no, I think I actually want to stay within a few hours driving distance from home. I had a student who he was adamant that he wanted to apply for computer science. Like, I'm only applying to computer science schools, colleges for computer science. I said, okay. He had a very strong computer science narrative. He ended up getting into a school for computer engineering. He got into a bunch of computer science schools, but he got into Purdue for computer engineering. And he's like, I don't think I want this. I'm like, hey, his parents were also wonderful. Hey, let's just explore this. Really look at it. They went, they flew there, they talked to the department. He went and he talked to professors, the whole thing. He's like, you know what? I actually really like this. I think I'm going to do this. And he ended up going for computer engineering. So I always say to students, it's my job to make sure you have options. It's your job to keep an open mind, because life takes you like this and you change your mind and you'll be very different maybe the fall of your senior year than you are when you start in 9th grade. So you have to be flexible, open-minded, and just explore and do your research.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristin. I love that. I love how you guide kids. All right. So as we wrap up, and by the way, we're going to go to Q&A in just a moment. So if you have a question, please throw it in the Q&A tab. We would appreciate it. And tomorrow we're talking about what to do this summer. That's at 1 p.m. It's called the College Countdown, 5 Essential Summer Steps for Rising Juniors and Seniors. And my guest will be Renee Minnick, who, like Kristin, has spent lots of years in college admissions. And she's going to talk about what kids can be doing over the summer to further their narrative, what Kristin just spoke about. All right, Kristin, before we go to Q&A, I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about your work with kids.
Sure, absolutely. I just also wanted to say one final parting thing that I always say, because I know this is a very daunting, it's a complex process, but there truly is a college for every single person. I just finished with all my seniors this past year, looking to see where they got in and where they're going. And everyone ended up where they should be, which is pretty much how it should be. But also college is what you make of it. Literally, all the colleges have the courses, the professors, study abroad, all the things. It's how you take advantage of that opportunity that's important. And I also want parents and students to know that thousands of students every year get rejected from colleges that they are qualified to go to. It is absolutely not a representation of your worth, how successful you'll be, how happy you'll be, any of those things. It's hard to see as a young person, but all of us on the other side, you're like, yeah, of course that makes sense. But I think it's to keep imploring that into your students as they go through this process is important. And the one other thing I would say is try to block out the noise. We talked a lot today about your narrative, authentic character. I can't tell you how many times I start with a student and they're like, yeah, I'm in the best buddies club because my friend took me along. I'm like, okay, that's your friend's journey. That's not your journey. Let's focus on you. So what's right for someone else may not be right for you. So be confident in your own journey, explore your own interests, and elevate that in your applications, and try to block out what everybody else is doing.
So important, Kristin, and also spoken as a mother, because I know you personally had guided 3 of your own kids through this process. And
I have. My daughter's graduating from college next month, so I'm excited for that. My last one.
The last one.
Yeah.
And I know that you're able to work with younger students.
I am.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. I love working with younger students. I've even counseled 7th graders. This just gives us the luxury of time to explore, to have conversations, and to think thoughtfully of what your student is going to do. So yes, I'm accepting, 8th graders, 9th graders, and 10th graders. Unfortunately, I'm full with 11th graders already this year, but I welcome any younger students that would love it.
Yeah, and we have other counselors. You'll meet Renee tomorrow,
Yes.
that specialize in older students too. Awesome. And if we can help you or your student with the process, we would love to be of assistance. You can find more about our program on our website, which is ectutoring.com, and specifically for college at /college-counseling. Or you can scan this QR code. Kristin, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all of us this afternoon. I hope parents, this has been helpful to you. And we'd love to serve you in any capacity we can. You can reach out at any time. Please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. where we're talking about summer planning and using what your child is going to do over the summer to craft that narrative to really help them stand out when it comes to admissions. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And if you have a chance, please take the survey that will pop up on your screen right at the end. Thanks, Kristin. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.